Hello everybody. Fascinating. Obviously I'm geeking out on all of the numbers that we've been given this morning, and those are big numbers, and I know you have a responsibility to report them as you will, but they're shocking, they're bold, they're accurate as can be for our current first past the post form of democracy. So it's wonderful to be here and to hear everything that has been said. John, obviously, I'm fangirling, statistically, to be in the same room as John Curtis, and also for Luke to tell us what the thoughts are. I am an undecided voter. I've been categorised as a Tory in the past. I've been categorised as a Labour in the past. I am actually a totally independent woman of independent thought. I am typical of an undecided voter in that I am an older woman, and I've voted in all different directions since 1979 was my first vote. I'm 62, so you don't have to look it up on Wikipedia. A little bit about my background, just so that it is accurate. I am the daughter of an immigrant. I was at a comprehensive school in North Wales all of my life, little Catholic comp in Rhyl, and I was a free school meals kid because we grew up in poverty, single parent family with an absent father. So that's where my background and my heart comes from. I have worked with the Labour government. I worked with David Blunkett twice. The first, perhaps not surprisingly, was to introduce the numeracy hour back in the late 90s into primary schools. And then very actively, I did a lot of investigative reporting about grooming online after the death of little Sarah Payne. I sat on the task force and asked David to put that together, and we became the first country in the world to make grooming online a criminal act. So I have worked very actively, that was in the Home Office, on that. And then later I worked with Michael Gove, 2009 to 2011. Obviously that was under David Cameron, to put together, that took 2 years. I chaired a task force there, and that was about maths education from the age of 5 to 19, because I was very unhappy with what Labour was suggesting for primary school education, particularly in the maths arena. So that's my background, which perhaps you didn't know, and I just say that so that you don't think, oh, she's just an old bird from the telly who used to count up and has nothing to do with politics. I have been quite active within the political arena, but in very specific circumstances to do with children and education in the past. So we have seen some cracking numbers, but we are a very, very, very long way from a general election, and obviously everybody here can't emphasise that enough. So, Labour may want to interpret what's been said today as a landslide victory, which is definite. Well, it isn't. The margins are narrowing, and that's why I believe that tactical voting is going to play a huge part in the next election. But I emphasise, tactical voting should not be needed. I believe every voter should count, but every voter doesn't count in the first past the post system that we have in this country today. We're the only ones in Europe, other than Belarus, who has this system. That's a great endorsement, isn't it? All other countries have some form of proportional representation. I'm not here to talk about PR, but I'm just placing that out there. I am not here saying, oh, everyone should vote tactically. I'm saying they should in the next election, because that's a pragmatic solution to what we have. It may not surprise you that I'm not a fan of this Conservative government. I'm not. In fact, I would vehemently oppose them. But I'm here to talk about tactical voting, and it's a very new concept online. I think it was 2017, so very recently, when the first crack at it happened, and Best for Britain, through voting.org.
Get voting.
There 4.5 million people used that. at that time, and that was for a general election. Very recently, I was working with stopthetories.vote, and it was fascinating. I found it fascinating, particularly to do with the numbers. So I was on to Josh every day. How many people have looked at it? How many people have looked at it? And this was the first time for local elections that it was available. And a small team of people who had done their best. They don't have, huge donors, unlike certain political parties. They're just a group of people doing their best. And they put it together, and the very simple system was you went on to stopthetories.vote, put in your postcode, and it told you if there was a council ward election for your postcode. If so, if it was Labour, they'll probably win. If it was Green, it was if it was Tory, because the whole emphasis of it was to stop the Tories. It would advise, as best they knew, on the data that they had at that time, what you should probably vote if your whole intention was to stop the Tories. It did what it said on the can. We were surprised, but we were pumping it out on social media. There was nothing on general media. It was all on social media. And 500,000 people accessed that site within the 5 days leading up to the local election. That's significant. You weren't talking about it, unless there's anybody on social media here, but the capacity for social media to influence change, I think, has grown significantly since Brexit, actually, since the vote. I mean, things have changed remarkably. It's becoming much more sophisticated, as you say, because you will be doing Best for Britain, will be doing this. And I think people will become much more aware of what they want. Do they want this disgraceful, in my view, Conservative government to go, or don't they? And I think we will see what advice is given change very rapidly and in a very sophisticated manner before the next election, which we all assume will be next year, not this year. So I just want to go back to the local elections. 500,000 went there. They enjoyed it as well. A lot of people who went on the website would come back and say, "Oh yeah, this is fantastic. It's the first time I've been able to see this. This is exciting. I'm definitely going to use it next time." And it was spreading and spreading very rapidly in the days leading up to that election. And I stayed up all night. I was watching you, John, all night until 6 a.m. For the results of the local election. I pulled a late nighter, an all-nighter, and I was delighted to see the results where the Conservatives lost. We didn't know at the time it would eventually be 1,063 seats. Yes, a third of their seats. And it was exciting for people. I would say that, that it was exciting particularly for a younger group who were becoming more actively involved in politics. But I want to move on to, the first number that you gave, Naomi, and obviously there are a million caveats in there, was 470 for Labour versus 129 for the Conservatives. And we pulled out a few of the names that if reform, at the moment, on these figures, if there was an election, all of those caveats, we're not saying that this is what's going to happen, but if an election happened, let's say next month, this would be an accurate prediction. If reform doesn't stand down in these seats, then these people, according to the prediction, would lose their seats. Mordaunt in Portsmouth North, Lee Anderson in Ashfield, Rees-Mogg, Johnson in Uxbridge, that they, according to this data, would lose. If reform stand down, as the prediction says, then they probably wouldn't. So does that give Richard Tice an immense power? That's another question that, I'm sure you will be asking. And what about this party political thing? Does he now wield power if he can have this kind of influence on the deputy Conservative chairman of the Conservative Party and the previous Prime Minister and others? So it's absolutely fascinating, I think, now, and I think whatever Best for Britain has told us today will have a significant effect on what the parties, they will be watching this data. I, of course, am targeting not 129 for the Conservative Party. I prefer they only had 70 to 80 members of Parliament after the next election, but we can all live in hope. One of the things I do want to say before I end is that what Luke was saying is I mean, you do it very accurately with focus groups and so on. I'm finding a direct reflection of what you've said today on social media. Absolutely so. And one of the things is that local media, I think, will become very important. London media, and you know, I've been in the media for 41 years, so I'm part of this. London media say very little about what's going on outside unless it has some direct effect on what's happening in Westminster. We look in and not out. I don't live in London. I don't like living in London. I live in Bristol. I grew up in the north. I lived in Leeds for many years. So I have this sort of sense of not wanting to look inwards. And we are stuck with a massively unpopular government. And I have found that it's brought a sense of despondency and anger with a lot of, I'm just feeding back what I see on socials. And people used to have a sense that they had no voice. You'd often get a response, oh, they're all the same, oh, it'll all be the same, nothing will change, they'll just get away with it, particularly in the corrupt view. And I think a lot of that has to do with very little reporting in general media of the things that happen. I was absolutely shocked this morning, shocked yesterday when the Committee of Public Accounts gave their 7th review, and there's nothing. You know, they made an announcement that the 2 years pre-Johnson, it's 5.5 billion, this Committee for Public Accounts, 5.5 billion in fraud and waste, had quadrupled in the following 2 years when Sunak was Chancellor to 21 billion. No headline, nothing. Within that, they said HMRC was a department for concern. Nothing. Within that, they talked particularly about PPE and the VIP lanes. They said that £6 billion of the £7.9 billion that went through the VIP lanes for testing, it was £6 billion. They were recommended by Tories. And 6 billion was it? Nothing. No one's reporting it. 230,000 pensioners are still waiting for their proper pension. They have been underpaid and some have died while they have been waiting. Nothing. But those are the realities that people are living. These are the things that people who are disconnected from Westminster are feeling, and that's what's reflecting in what is being said to Luke. So we are pragmatic. I wish we didn't live in I love this country, by the way. I absolutely adore it. I've been joyously living here for a very long time. I believe the government that we have now is so completely detached from the politics that I grew up with. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it's completely detached. And the word corruption comes up time after time. But we are pragmatic. Tactical voting will be important. I hope you report on the tactical voting and what people like Best for Britain will be putting together. And all I will do is end on saying there are some very, very exciting plans being put together for the year ahead in our group. Thank you very much.